You'll know when you have a wild woman. She'll practice her craft without boundaries. She is truly autonomous.
Her loyalty is only to the family she serves, a midwife who will not allow herself to be held back by a system she didn't create.
This podcast is for the birth keepers who want to grow and change. We are open to learning through self-reflection and supportive community. We are creating this space to explore without judgment. We are remembering we were
Born wild. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Born Wild podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sophia, and today I have with me Kristin. And I'll just hand it right over to you to introduce yourself to our listeners, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I'm Kristin Hauser. I'm an acupuncturist herbalist by training. I'm a mother of 4, and I run an online business called Womb Medicine, where I have an herbal shop and lots of different online offerings, including Fertile Women Academy and workshops. And really, my path has been to support women in their hormone healing fertility through postpartum. So I utilize Chinese medicine, as that's my professional training, as well as somatics, and really just hormonal intelligence overall, really understanding how female physiology works.
Wow, I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit in all my questions in an hour.
Okay.
I just took a couple notes. I was like, oh my gosh, I have so many questions. Okay, so my first question is, where did this journey start for you? Some people, it's like when I became a mother, or like it was like some of these things you listed already a part of who you were before you had children. Like where does your journey begin?
Yeah. Yeah, really, it begins as a teenager or like as my menarche kind of process unfolded.
Mhm.
Um, Pretty standard kind of American upbringing. And I had a lot of pain with my menstrual cycle starting as a teenager. Not right away, not right when I got my cycle, but in my kind of later teen years and into my early 20s. And I grew up in a fairly holistic home. My dad's a chiropractor, so we didn't always turn to Western medicine first. But I was in this situation where I was like, I don't really know what to do, because if you go to a gynecologist, they're just going to offer, well, I did go to a gynecologist, they just offer pain medication, stronger pain medication, or birth control. Those are like the solutions. And I even tried birth control and I was like, wow, this does not work for me at all. It doesn't feel good in my body. Like it doesn't align with my values. And so, yeah, that began like a decade or so long journey of healing my cycle and just uncovering so many different layers of holistic healing. And that's how I got more interested into Chinese medicine and ended up studying that as well. And along that trajectory, I spent time in India studying yoga, and I taught asana and meditation for several years. And I trained to become a doula, and I served women in sort of the doula role as I was getting my master's degree. And so I just had a real affinity for women's health. And I think that came from my own personal experience and evolution.
Mhm. Isn't that beautiful how like you can't really see it in the moment, but anything that we like struggle with and triumph over, like is just kind of leading us towards,
Mhm.
who we are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It really was like that. And now I can see like, oh yeah, I'm so glad I went through that, because then my births were totally different than they might have been otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 4 great births at home. And yeah, it's like, wow, there is a reason for all of the things that we kind of go through in life.
Well, can you share a little bit about your home births? Because we have a lot of birth workers who listen, but we also have a lot of families that listen, and they're all trying to figure out how they can have their optimal birth experience, and usually are planning a home birth. So can you touch base on, like you said, I might have had a different experience if I hadn't learned what I learned, and, so what were your experiences like, and what would you, advise somebody?
Yeah, so I've had 4 unique but also very similar home birth experiences. My first one was with a midwife, a licensed midwife in the state of California. And it was, yeah, just like a great home birth experience. However, leading up to that birth experience, I was really questioning the role of of state regulations in midwifery care and how that might impact my particular birth. And what I was getting really granular about, you could say, or like really wanting to know what road I would take was in particular situations like what happens if I go into labor before 36 weeks, or what happens if I go beyond 42 weeks, or just whatever the regulations are in that particular state at the time. And so there were many of these situations where I was like, well, for me personally, that's not a reason to go to the hospital, but I also understand I'm putting my licensed midwife kind of on the line if she then comes to attend me. So that was kind of a challenging um third trimester of my first pregnancy, just to kind of start to think about these things. And what I kind of settled on was that I would birth unattended or unassisted in the case that one of these things happened, right? None of those things happened. I had like a pretty straightforward birth at 40 weeks and some days. And my midwife was just there for the last half hour. And she was very hands off. Her name's Lindsay Milas. She's great. She serves Southern California. And yeah, it was just a great, easeful first birth. And it's like I knew a lot about birth with my mind, but there's something different that happens with that first birth, is like then you live birth and you really know it in your body. And once I felt like I really knew birth in my own system, then I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna free birth basically from here on out, unless I have a reason to think that I would need additional support. So my other births since that first one have been just family. So just my husband or my children or both. And with my third birth, I did have my mom there as well, which was really sweet. And she was helping with my older kids. So I think to circle back, like that gives you a little overview of my own personal experience. I think maybe if I could say what the most important thing to do to prepare or to consider for home birth is, yeah, just what you're willing to take responsibility for, and what you're willing to unlearn or untangle from potentially the system you've kind of been surrounded by. Because a lot of the choices that you make, even if you have a licensed attendant or a birth keeper, a traditional midwife, a lot of the choices you make, they are looked down upon by the collective larger society, or they are questioned by people. And if you're not really clear in your convictions, I think that's when I see women really just struggle with the decisions they're making and not being able to follow their own inner power and their own intuition. And instead, they may take a path that they didn't really align with, but they felt like, okay, maybe it is the safest option. So there's so many different avenues of it, but I think unlearning and really coming back to your own power and intuition has to be central.
How do you navigate the difference for you between like intuition and fear?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, I think is just to recognize that fear is a very normal part of being alive and also birthing in any situation, right? Just to normalize that you can be afraid of something and still choose to move forward with it. And that's not wrong or bad.
Yeah. You don't have to be fearless to go into birth.
Yeah, you really don't. But how to navigate the difference, I think that is, for me, been a process of surrounding myself with other women who have made or are making similar choices, and really talking to other women about their own birth experiences, listening to other women's birth experiences, and taking time with any fears that come up and letting them be held in those kind of spaces or those kind of containers where it's not someone who I'm going to go to, and I know they're going to be like, well, you should go get it checked out. You should go in, you should, and we all know what that means. That means like going in, getting an ultrasound, doing some type of testing. So I try to surround myself with women who I know are going to maybe reflect back to me or have similar values and say, well, what do you think your options are? And then kind of following through, like, what would that option give me? So let's say I have a fear come up during pregnancy and I'm like, you know, whatever it is, I don't know, placenta previa, let's just say it's that. Like, I'm afraid that my placenta is covering my cervix and I'm just going to have a terrible birth experience. And then I might go in my mind, okay, well, what are my options? There's always option to do nothing and just wait and see how things progress. There's the option to go get it checked out. And, then I kind of walk through these steps in my head. And then that helps me kind of discern, okay, is this a fear that I want to follow through until see where it takes me? Or am I okay to wait? And yeah, I think that like the slowing down process is the most essential part, I would say, of navigating intuition versus fear. Because fear has a very, in Chinese medicine, it's related to the kidneys. So it has a very kind of primal force with it. And you can, if you react to it, it is kind of like maybe pushing you forward or pushing you into a space of reactivity. And that is typically not where we are residing in our intuition. So if we're able to pause and actually feel the fear in our system and allow it to settle, and then you can, find different pathways forward, but at least you're engaged in the process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Have you heard of the BRAIN acronym?
I have not.
Yeah. It stands for benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, and then N is I've seen it like nothing or need time. And so I always tell people when you're going down this path and it's going as planned, and then all of a sudden there's a fork in the road and there's decisions that need to be made, that's when you could utilize this. And I always say, like, don't go in order. You tend to want to do the last one first, the need time, like, is this urgent? Like, I need to make a decision right now, like seconds count, or is it like, take a week, think about it, especially if you're like in the hospital and they come at you and it makes it seem urgent. Like, I really ask the question because sometimes they're like, oh no, it's fine. We'll step out of the room, talk about it. And then you can work your way down, like, what are the benefits of doing XYZ? What are the risks of doing XYZ? Are there other options that could get me similar information? What's my gut telling me? What if I do nothing, and that's helped me a lot with like medical decisions for my son. And I usually suggest it if anyone's heading to the hospital for whatever reason, to have that in their back pocket.
Yeah, that's a great resource as well.
Yeah. I'm curious if this is true for you, because I have had like a handful of times in my life where I can really put my finger in hindsight on like that was my intuition talking, versus fear. And for me, fear has come across as like a lot of dialogue and a lot of talk and a lot of emotion. And I could write a book on it, and there's really big fear, like feelings around it. And the times where in hindsight, it was my intuition was like one word, no feelings around it at all. Almost you could talk yourself in or out of it, where you're like, that doesn't make sense. You can kind of like brush it off as like, why would I think that? And it's come across as my own voice in my head, but I'm like, that doesn't make sense for this person, or like that medicine's really safe. I know so many people who take it, where it's just like, don't do it, or whatever it is. And every time I've dismissed it, it's been very clear very quickly that it was my gut or God or like whatever. Everyone has like different names for the same thing. But yeah, and so I'm curious if you've had experiences like that, and have they shown up in that way?
Yeah, I don't know if I can think of one in particular that's related to birth because that nothing is like jumping out at me. But yeah, I do think it is like that the mm, yeah, like you're saying, kind of the quiet, still voice that comes
Mm.
through that is more intuitive rather than the fast action or like heightened emotional state for
Mm.
sure.
Yeah, awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
I'm always interested to hear about how it like shows up for different people. Because I think that the fear can be a big thing that holds people back from doing what they intuitively feel is right, whether it is like you or your partner, because a lot of times it can show up for dads, the fear of like safety. What if something happens? Like, does that mean I am then in charge? Like, how was that for your partner? Because sometimes they do the like, well, you're the one giving birth, so if something goes wrong, like then I have to know what to do. Like they can feel like
Mhm.
it falls on their shoulders. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've heard that from a lot of women that I support. I think what's unique maybe about my situation is that I had a lot of knowledge about birth, like with my mind going into the birth experience. So my husband was more like, okay, yeah, I trust that you've got it, right? And the way I approach birth and just life in general, like I think the way we approach birth is also the way we approach life typically, um, is really just cultivating trust in myself, like that whatever comes, I can figure it out in that moment.
Mhm.
I think that is ultimately what it's come down to. Whether that means I'm having a free birth and I figure out in that moment that I need to get support or I need to transfer or whatever, or I have a birth attendant there and I actually am not in a good place with them and I need to ask them to leave. Like there's so many different possibilities.
Mhm.
Um, but it is a practice of, yeah, trusting yourself that you can respond moment to moment to what's needed.
Mhm.
And I think that, yeah, is part of it. And then for my particular situation with my husband, we also just had a lot of conversations. So for our first free birth, he definitely had some kind of things to work through around, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And yeah, that just, without going into the details of those conversations, those were also conversations that happened a long time ago. Um, I think just talking through things, being open and honest, and not being clear that it was never my intention that his responsibility was to like save me from anything that happened during the birthing process.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the way we've navigated that.
Mhm.
I've definitely wanted his support. It's not like I'm birthing completely alone,
Yeah.
but he also knows what to expect and what his role is. And something that really did help us a lot is with that first birth, when we had a midwife, we also had a doula. I also had a friend come. So
Mhm.
it was like he had a lot of support around him for that first one. But what ended up happening is most of the birthing process was just him and I.
Mhm.
And we only had the birth kind of team, in quotation marks, show up for the last 30 to 45 minutes
Wow.
of that birth. Yeah. So we did some childbirth education. This is kind of just a funny little story. We had done some childbirth education through the Birthing from Within model of Pam England.
Mhm.
And he had this little piece of paper that I didn't even really know about. It was just like a cheat sheet kind
Oh,
of
cute.
that showed like different stages of labor and how I might be acting. And I never saw him get it out, but he said he did get it out a couple of times during that first birth. So I just find that really kind of funny. And he
That's
was the one who was like, "Do you want to call the midwife? I think maybe you should. If you're gonna have her here, you need to call her now."
cute.
Yeah, and we did end up calling her, and she came for the last
Yeah.
little bit.
That's cute. I kind of picture him like rolling up his sleeve and like looking at the ink on his arm, like washed away by the birth pool water and like,
Yeah.
oh no. Cute. That's a funny story. I love that. Can you speak a little bit about traditional Chinese medicine? I don't think that's a subject that we've talk too much in depth on, and I love it. I don't know that much about it. I just know it has worked for my family. But will you touch base on like, your education around that, how you've utilized it for yourself or maybe families that you've worked with, like when you were a doula, or yeah, just anything that you feel like families who are listening who are pregnant or postpartum would be interested in hearing about?
Yeah, so I've been an acupuncturist for just over 10 years now. Um, and Chinese medicine is a really intricate system of healing that includes a lot of different modalities. So it includes acupuncture, herbalism, body work, and it's really like about harmonizing yin and yang in your own system. And yin and yang are two concepts that emerge from the natural world. So what I love about Chinese medicine is it really gives us a framework to see ourselves and our physiology outside of sort of the westernized approach. Um, and yeah, I mean, it's been my practice for the last 10 years, and I have focused on women's health during that time. But I use it with my kids, of course, and families. And I would say probably for the people listening to this podcast, what's most interesting is maybe how TCM approaches the postpartum time. And that is really centered around what's called the sitting moon or sitting the month. And that would be like a 28, 29-day period of really resting and prioritizing warmth, warming foods, not having anything cold. I mean, even some of my teachers would recommend not even washing your hair during that time, which is like maybe there are cultural differences there, but really protecting yourself and cocooning yourself as you recover from birth and let your vitality return to you, because we do offer a lot of our essence, or what's called Jing in Chinese medicine, to our children and through the birthing process. And if we're able to rest during that postpartum time, we're able to recover that and also build our blood and our chi back up again.
Is this totally different from or pretty much the same as I've heard of it referred to as confinement in, like, I don't know if it's a specific Asian culture or
Yeah, confinement it's a similar term.
uh-huh.
And we don't like that in the Western world. We're like, no confinement. We want to get out. But a lot of midwives say like 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days around the bed. That's already 15 days
Right.
of just being in your bedroom. So that's a lot.
Yeah. I think that was La Leche League that came up with that.
Really? Okay.
I think, I mean, somebody let me know if I'm speaking not correctly.
Yeah.
I think La
I don't know
Leche
who came
League
up with it.
was like
Yeah.
for optimal breastfeeding, and that was their recommendation. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is about that. It is about like honoring the bigness of birth and allowing the body to really recover. And it's kind of in opposition to bounce back culture, right? To thinking like, I just need to get back to working out or being the leader of the home or the runner of the family, all the family systems and all of that. So I know for my mom, like she didn't have that as her reality. So that's something I've really tried to change with my 4 births.
I tell women this all the time. It feels like every postpartum women are trying to improve on the last one, that they're like, well, that didn't work the way I thought, like, how could I do this differently? And they keep trying to improve on it. With your 4 experiences, what would be postpartum tips that you would give somebody who's expecting their first, like, or even their second, because sometimes there's like that piece where now you have another kid to like, that's in the mix,
There are differences for each one, but I think the first is what I see women making the mistake of is not hiring some help or not asking for help. So it doesn't even have to be that you're hiring help, but not accepting help in the home. Like thinking that you and your partner can do it on your own it's really challenging to do that because you're doing it 24/7 and it's totally new. You're learning how to breastfeed. You're learning how to do everything with your newborn. It's your first time doing it. And it's going to be more than you anticipate. And that's not bad or wrong. I'm just letting you know that the way you think it's going to be, it's going to be more challenging than that. And I don't mean that in like it's terrible and it's going to be bad. I just mean it is going to push you in a way that maybe you haven't experienced before. And having a little more support in the home, whether that's preparing meals or helping you with laundry or just sitting by you and talking to you, it can be so, so helpful. So
Yeah.
that is probably my biggest tip. And like the biggest thing I'm like, no, listen, you have to have someone. You can't just do this, you and your husband and your baby alone for, 2, 3, 4 weeks. Like that's not the way it should be. You should really have some support around you.
Yeah. I usually say if all you could do is lay in bed and feed your baby, would everything else fall apart around you for the next month? And plan on a month, kind of like you plan on going
Yeah.
past your due date and you plan on having a 2-day labor. And then if you go early and it's, 8 hours, you awesome, but like you at least you had like the mental preparation. Um,
Yeah, I
and then if you
agree.
don't need the full month for whatever reason, then fine. But like at least you had it dialed in where you
Yeah.
could like, because you, like you were saying, our culture hasn't ever done this. So we have to put in the footwork prenatally. It's not just going to magically happen where you're like it would be very rare for someone to be like, I was supported so well and I didn't have to plan any of it. Like hopefully one day it's just like handed down from generation to generation, but like you have to really build it, or it's not going to
You
happen.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do have to take some action. And that can be something like setting up a meal train for yourself or asking friends to come over and preparing meals and putting them in the freezer. There
Mhm.
are a lot of creative solutions. I just think, it is important to start thinking about that in the pregnancy because it's so easy to focus on the birth.
Mhm.
And sometimes the postpartum period gets kind of left out.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought I heard you say that something like, well, it's different depending on which baby it is. Is it very
Yes, it is.
specific, like even from the third to fourth kind of thing? Or do you mean just from like 1 to 2 or?
I think from 1 to 2, 1 to 2 is a challenge just because you're accustomed to one baby. You're not accustomed to meeting the needs of two children at the same time.
Mhm.
My easiest transition was 2 to 3. And that's just my personal experience, but I've heard that from other women too.
Mhm.
But yeah, with any subsequent children, then you also need to be thinking about, do you need care for those older children?
Mhm.
Who's going to be taking care of of the older babies? My baby is here with me right now.
Yeah, if you hear
Um,
cooing,
yeah,
that.
if you hear him, he's with us for a few minutes. So yeah, I think that just as you add more members to the family, the logistical complexity does grow a bit. So you do have to keep that in mind. And if you want to rest, you really have to prioritize that. I always prepare my kids. They kind of know the routine now, at least my older two do, of, after mommy has a baby, we can lay in bed together, we can watch movies, we can play card games, but like mommy's not going to be getting up and doing things.
Mhm.
And that's why we're going to have other people in the home helping us.
Mhm.
And I just tell them ahead of time, like mommy has to rest and I have to get better. And not because I'm sick, but just like I just have to heal from the birth is what I tell them.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that helps too.
I know I try to remind women you can feel powerful and amazing and still rest, that
Yeah.
super women deserve rest too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's
Totally.
really tricky when you feel like, oh my God, that was an amazing birth. I feel so great. Like it's really hard to keep those women in bed.
Yeah, that was me with my third. I was like, and I did rest. I still stayed in bed and all of that, but like I didn't feel really like I needed to.
Mhm.
But in retrospect, it's like, well, I've had 4 kids. I don't have a prolapse. Like I don't have any leaking.
Mhm.
I'm generally in, like I've recovered well each time, but like I've put a lot of effort into the recovery process
Mhm.
because I'd rather do it now than like a year from now be like, whoa, my body's falling apart. I need to like do something about it. It's always easier to prevent something. And I think that's really hard to get across
Mhm.
because it's already so much to add a baby to the family,
Mhm.
uh, especially that first time, that it's hard to have the insight to plan for the future, to plan for when you're postmenopausal and you want to still be able to potentially play with grandchildren, when you're in your later years,
Right.
then you're thinking about your body in that way.
Yeah. I'm curious about a couple things, and it's mainly around like postpartum nourishment or advice, you've had 4 children. Are there like go-tos for you where you're like, oh my gosh, this was like a lifesaver? Are there things, I'm sure a lot of things are very particular depending on somebody's constitution or like what's going on for them, but there's some things like across the board you can recommend. And what are maybe your thoughts or the thoughts around traditional Chinese medicine in terms of placenta medicine?
Yeah, these are all great questions. I would say the top recommendation is just to really focus on warm, brothy, soupy, cooked foods in the first 3 to 4 weeks postpartum. For me, I make it the full 6 weeks. I really don't have many raw foods at all. And really focus on a lot of animal products. So whether that's like a meat stock or bone broth based soups. I love oxtail stew or slow cooked like a roast beef. Um, Chicken soup is another really common one, especially in the Chinese medicine tradition. And they'll typically add goji berries and jujube, like the kind of dates, to their soup. And that just enriches the blood building properties of the soup.
Mhm.
Also, I try to have like a liver pate in the postpartum time. Um, Lots of herbal infusions. So it could be various herbs, but just like nettles, red raspberry leaf,
Mhm.
alfalfa, oat straw, things that are going to bring more minerals back into your system and help with breast milk production as well. Those are kind of my go-tos as far as like what I really focus on. Um, and then placenta medicine. I know this has like a lot of kind of controversy around it. I did encapsulate my first placenta and I ended up not really using it much because I think it increased my supply, which was not what I needed at that time. But I do know for some women, they report that it decreases their supply. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot to it and probably a lot of bio-individual approaches to using it or not using it. I what I would consider is like maybe having it around because if it's gone, it's gone. But
Mhm.
if you have it, you always can just not use it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way I've approached it with the second time when my daughter was I had it, but I never really used it. And
And
I
do you
just did
mean
a raw.
like have it like put the placenta in the freezer in case you want it processed or like have it processed just in case you need it?
I had my husband process it
Mhm.
very simply. Like I just did a very raw, he just cut it essentially into chunks that I could have used in like a smoothie or something.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't
Um,
sure if like because of all
yeah,
the
I didn't have
farming
some.
things, if you were
Mhm.
like, we don't recommend freezing it, because then that's cold, or if that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, of course that could come into play, but no, that's just the way I did it.
Okay.
With my third and fourth, though, I just put it in the freezer and I ended up burying it later. So I never really used it medicinally. I will say in the Chinese medicine tradition, it is a medicinal. It is not really used in the way we think about it in the Western sense. It's actually used for lung conditions, chronic coughs, um, it is a kidney tonic and a lung tonic, but it's not like for everyone, if that makes sense. It's used in specific situations. So you can always tincture it as well, and that way you have it preserved over time in case you want to use it.
Mhm.
And it's more shelf stable than doing the capsules.
Mhm. Okay, great. Thank you. Um, I'm just being aware of our time but I did want to touch base on, I know you've got children. Are you still working? You mentioned fertility or Fertile Women Academy. Like, what are your offerings for people and how do you, because like I'm hearing everything you're saying. I was like, do you like work with people for postpartum planning? Like, what are your
Yeah.
offerings for
Yeah.
for families?
So I have various offerings. I have a TCM herbal shop. So I have various formulas that are targeted for pregnancy and postpartum there. And then I also have something called the Vital Pregnancy Collective, where I share more about pregnancy, birth, postpartum preparation. And you can ask me specific personalized questions in there as well. And then I have Fertile Woman Academy, which is more fertility focused. So my background in acupuncture was really focused on holistic fertility. I started in um, a clinic where we were working a lot with women who were even pursuing IVF and reproductive technology. But after my experience for several years doing that, I kind of developed more of a expertise around helping women who had maybe had failed reproductive technology treatments or decided, look, I tried the reproductive technology and it didn't work for me, or I just didn't really like it. It doesn't align with my family values. Um, so my work around fertility is really focused on that, around women who are choosing not to use reproductive technology. And yeah, I do offer one-on-one. It's pretty limited right now because I have a 4-month-old.
Mhm.
But that is something I will have ongoing for sure.
Awesome. And before we close, I did want to touch base on your work around like somatic body work. Like, can you, just in case somebody is like, I have never even heard that word before, what are you even talking about? Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I got interested into somatics really through yoga, but then I studied with Kimberly Ann Johnson for several years in her course, Activate Your Inner Jaguar. And her body of work is based on the work of Peter Levine. And his body of work is called somatic experiencing. So it is a trauma resolution type of modality. And what I love about it is if trauma is something that happens too fast and it's too much for our system to sort of metabolize. Healing trauma is about going slower, giving your body time, really allowing yourself to sense your environment and feel what's happening in real time. And I found that when I was working with through working with a lot of women have traumatic experiences in their past and store them in the pelvic space, whether that's through, sexual trauma, gynecological trauma, and or birth trauma. And these all come up. They often come up in the postpartum time because so much is opened and sort of released. And I found that I needed an additional skill set beyond what I had with acupuncture and herbal medicine. So that's what really got me into somatics, is just wanting additional skill set to help women process some of the experiences they've had so they could really sense into their own power and have the birth experiences that they want, or just any type of sexual or other pelvic related experiences. So yeah, that's a little bit about the somatic approach that I often take.
And is this like an in-person kind of thing, or like, is it possible to do it on Zoom? Like, is it virtual work or?
Yeah, so there's different options. For a long time, I offered like pelvic mapping sessions, which are in person and include pelvic and genital touch. That's educational in its purposes or in its intent. But I also, with the women, because my practice right now is solely online,
Mhm.
and I do offer somatic sessions, or that is part of my kind of one-to-one work, is working with women in a somatic way. So it does work in the virtual setting, but it doesn't include touch, obviously, when you are in that virtual setting.
Mhm. For people who are curious about in person, where are you?
I split my time between Kansas City and Costa Rica currently.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So I'm in Kansas City right now. That's where I grew up and where my family is. And then, yeah, we're in Costa Rica about half the year.
Okay, awesome. Well, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you were really hoping that we would mention or talk about, or?
I don't think so. Yeah, just happy to answer if you're listening and you have questions. I hang out on Instagram a lot, so you can come ask me there, or head over to womb-medicine.com and you can read a lot more. Oh, sorry,
You guys
baby.
can talk about teething tips.
Yeah, you can read a lot more about my offerings there.
Great. Well, thank you so much for making time, even though you got a little fussy one.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was so great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks everybody for listening. You can find us at Born Wild Podcast on Instagram. For inquiries or feedback, you can email us at bornwildpodcast@gmail.com. You can find me, Emma Ray, on Instagram at Emma Ray, REA.
Sophia at sophiabirth.com.
And me, Leah, at Bay Area Home Birth.
We would really appreciate it if you would rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. It helps us reach more people. And as always,
Stay wild.